Hi, my name's Tor and I'm one of the leaders of Thetford Vineyard Church. We're getting near the end of Lent now. It probably seems a long time ago that we were celebrating Pancake Day and learning all about Ash Wednesday. I wonder how your giving something up for Lent has gone. I've not been too bad. I've had a couple of little cheats, but all in all been pretty good. Now, as we're approaching the end of Lent, we are going to reach the Easter week, otherwise known as Holy Week. And this is made up of a series of days on which stories are told about the things that Jesus did on his approach up to dying on the cross. So this video and the next video you're going to watch are going to cover quite a lot of stories. We're going to start off today with Palm Sunday and find out about the day that Jesus entered Jerusalem, the capital city, to begin this dramatic week.
At this time, the Jewish people were celebrating a festival called Passover that had been celebrated since the time of Moses, when God brought his people out of Egypt. So Jesus was going to Jerusalem to celebrate. Jesus and his disciples stopped in a town.
You coming?
And Jesus told two of his disciples to go on ahead of them.
Okay.
He told them to go into a village and that they would see a young donkey that no one had ever ridden.
Rock!
He told them to untie it and bring it to him. If anyone asks, "What are you doing?" he told them to just say, "The Lord needs it, and we'll return it soon."
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So the disciples did what Jesus said and brought him the donkey. A long time ago, before Jesus was even born, God had said that the Savior, the King of Israel, would come to Israel in this way, and now Jesus was doing just as God had said. The news that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem swept through the city. Many heard about all the amazing things he had done, so they cut palm branches and ran to see him.
Huh?
The Pharisees and religious rulers realized that there was nothing they could do, for everyone was going to see Jesus. Jesus rode into the city of Jerusalem, and the crowd spread their coats on the road ahead of him. His followers began to shout and sing as they walked along, praising God for all the wonderful miracles they had seen. The Pharisees were upset,
Hey, Jesus!
and they told Jesus to stop the people from saying things like that. But Jesus said, if they keep quiet, the stones along the road would burst into cheers. So the people kept on singing, "Blessings on the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Praise God in highest heaven." The entire city of Jerusalem was in an uproar as he entered, asking, "Who is this?" And the crowds replied, "It's Jesus." And Jesus rode the donkey through the street of Jerusalem to the temple in a triumphal entry, just as God said he would many years before.
Can you imagine what it must have felt like to be in the crowd that day? Why not hit pause now and have some time making these fun Palm Sunday crafts? I've put on a song following these pictures, which you could use to wave your palm leaves just like the people in the crowd, and imagine what it really would have felt like.
We have a king who rides a donkey. We have a king who rides a donkey. We have a king who rides a donkey, and his name is Jesus. Jesus, the king is risen. Jesus, the king is risen. Jesus, the king is risen early in the morning. Trees are waving a royal welcome. Trees are waving a royal welcome. Trees are waving a royal welcome for the king called Jesus. Jesus, the king is risen. Jesus, the king is risen. Jesus, the king is risen early in the morning. We have a king who cares for people. We have a king who cares for people. We have a king who cares for people, and his name is Jesus. Jesus, the king is
The next special day in Easter week we're going to look at is Maundy Thursday. This day is very special to Christians as it's when the Last Supper is celebrated. This special meal was the place where Jesus taught his followers that they should love one another and put others before themselves. Jesus showed this by washing the feet of his disciples.
Jesus and his disciples gathered for one final meal together. Jesus got up from the table, took off his robe, and began to wash his disciples' feet. Jesus loved his disciples, and he knew the time was coming for him to leave them and return to heaven. When Jesus came to Peter, he said,
Wait.
"Are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus said, "You don't understand what I'm doing now, but someday you will."
No.
Peter said, "You will never wash my feet." But Jesus then told him that unless he washed his feet, he would not belong to him.
Oh, well then, okay.
Then Peter said, "Then wash my hands and head as well, not just my feet." But Jesus told him that was not necessary. He just needed to wash his feet for Peter to become clean. So Jesus finished washing their feet and said that the disciples should do to others as he had done for them. He told them to follow the example that he had set for them, to serve each other and not think of themselves as greater than any other. Then God would bless them for doing as Jesus had taught them to do.
Did you know that the head of the Catholic Church, the Pope, washes 12 people's feet every Maundy Thursday? What a smelly job. Even more surprisingly, these 12 people are actually prisoners who've been brought from a local prison. The Pope is showing in practical action that to follow Jesus, you have to put the people who everyone else thinks is last first.
Hello everyone, I'm Captain Diane from the Salvation Army and this is my dog Mackenzie. We often go for walks and as you will see I've got my special walking wellies on at the moment because we often go through very muddy paths and I don't know about you but I love squelching through the mud. So does Mackenzie and often his feet get really muddy. They're lovely and white now, but he'll have his muddy wellies on and I have to then come home and give him a wash and a shower, which he doesn't really like. But this story reminds me of Jesus washing his disciples' feet on a very special evening. They gathered together for a Passover meal, all of his friends up in an upper room, and that halfway through the meal Jesus suddenly gets up from the table, takes off his outer garment, and then he goes and pours some water into a bowl and grabs a towel and tucks it into his tunic. He does that because usually when people around Jesus' time went walking and things, they didn't have wellies and sturdy feet. They wore sandals and their feet got really mucky and dusty from all of the walking that they were doing. And usually when somebody came into a room for hospitality, to eat together, to share times together, there would be huge jugs of water that would be poured out and somebody's role would be to wash people's feet so that when they went round the room they would be all clean. A bit like some of you might have mums or grandmas who say when you come in, take those muddy shoes off, don't want that mud going all the way through our carpets. But nobody had done that on that evening when they gathered for this special meal. So Jesus knelt down and began to wash the feet of the disciples. Why did Jesus do that? He was the rabbi, a teacher, a leader of people. It's a bit like the head of your school saying they're going to wash your feet. Doesn't quite sound right, does it? But Jesus was showing us how to care for one another. In that moment, as they gathered, the need of those people around the table was for their feet to be cleaned. Now we as Christians in the Salvation Army are always seeking ways of where we can be like Jesus. And so he has told us to help and care for one another in what their needs are. I'm just going to ask for the camera to be scanned around our hall at the moment. You will see this is a place where we worship on a Sunday morning, but you'll see lots of other items here at the moment. And they are here because people have donated them to us, which then allows us to help people who may need a pair of shoes, haven't got toys at Christmas. And I know some of you, when I've come in and done assemblies, have given us food and have given us items that we can bless other people with. So just as Jesus was doing something for the disciples there, we are following his actions by doing things for other people who are in need. And so I want to thank you for what you've done to help us in the past, because we can't give out to other people if we don't get the donations. So when you've brought your tin of soup or your spaghetti, whatever, that comes together to allow us to bless and look after each other, because that's what Jesus wants us to do. He wants us to look out and care for one another. Have a good day.